The $1 $200 dinner bill hit my lap like a punch while drizzle soaked my shoes outside that Blue Ridge rooftop. Rowan, 58, retired auditor, still clutching the smooth edge of my old employee ID, wondered if being family now had an expiration date. Ever been left holding the check literally? The check lands with a soft thud, the weight of the leather folder heavier than it should be. The rooftop string lights flicker against the mist, casting halos over the dark blue tablecloth. Mara's smile, the one she's worn all evening for the servers, and anyone within earshot falters for just a breath before she slides her gaze away. Soren doesn't even lift his head. The faint smell of grilled trout still clinging from our plates turns sharp in my throat as I ease the folder open. $1,200, more than I spend on a month of groceries and utilities combined. They don't move. Mara's wine glass rests in her fingers like a trophy. Soren drums on his knee, the rhythm out of place with the jazz bleeding from the patio speakers. My mouth is dry, but I hear my own voice ask, "Was this your treat?" It's almost a joke, except no one laughs. Mara waves one hand, her nails catching the light. "You know it's not about the money, Rowan. We just wanted a nice night to talk about things, your house, your situation. How long can you keep up all that yard work?" Those stares. Her tone is all warmth, yet her eyes are already elsewhere scanning for the waiter. I reach for my wallet without a word, my fingers brushing the worn edge of a plastic card tucked behind the bills. My old employee ID. The corners are frayed, the laminate bubbling, but the photo me younger jaw, firmer eyes sharper, still stares back. A relic from the days I spent untangling numbers for a company that collapsed, under its own greed, a reminder of how quickly stability can vanish. I slide it back before either of them notices. Soren clears his throat. "Dad, maybe it's time we consider options? A condo, or somewhere with staff. You're still strong, sure, but what if he stops when Mara touches his wrist as if to remind him I'm sitting right here?" The server lingers politely. I hand over my card and hear Mara exhale long and theatrical. He insists, she murmurs to Soren as though I'm deaf. They don't even pretend to reach for their wallets. My chest tightens, not from the cost, I can cover it, but from the sudden clarity I'm not a father here. I'm a ledger entry, an account they're already auditing. By the time we step into the night air, the drizzle has turned steady. The mountains are shrouded, their outlines fading into the low clouds. Mara tucks herself under Soren's arm, her heels clicking quickly toward the valet. I linger by the awning, the damp receipt in my coat pocket like a cold blade. As their SUV door shuts, I catch Mara's voice, low but sharp. It's not like he'll be around forever. A pause, then the thud of the car pulling away. The mist beads on my coat as I stand alone on the slick rooftop landing. I pull the ID card from my wallet and let the lamplight catch its battered surface. The plastic feels colder than the night air, grounding me more than the railing beneath my hand. I close my fingers around it, breathe in the wet smell of rain and distant pine, and whisper to myself, almost amused, I've outlasted worse storms. The air in Clara Wynn's kitchen is a balm I didn't know I needed. The scent of apple pie drifts warm and steady, thick enough to blur the memory of rain clinging to my coat last night. Her old radio murmurs, jazz through a layer of static, soft trumpet notes, curling around the hum of her heater. Compared to the rooftop's damp cold, this feels like stepping into another season entirely. Clara sets a slice of pie in front of me, the crust still warm, flaky crumbs scattering as I slide the plate closer. "You look like someone wrung you out, Rowan," she says, her voice plain, but not unkind. Her silver hair catches the kitchen light, haloing her in a way Millie, my late wife, once had when she stood by the same counter decades ago. The thought settles on me like the pie's steam, comforting and a little bittersweet. I tell her about the dinner, the Blue Ridge view hidden behind drizzle. Mara's bright performance for strangers. Soren's silence, the way the bill landed like a judgment. Clara listens without interrupting, her eyes narrowing only when I mention Mara's casual jab about how long can you manage those stairs. She wipes her hands on a dish towel. "That girl's polishing her lines," she mutters, "and not for your benefit." From the archway between kitchen and living room, Ephraim stirs. He leans on the frame like it's habit, his posture easy, despite the stiffness of his shoulders. Retired chief accountant, 2 decades my senior, but sharper than most men, half his age. He hasn't lost his habit of squinting like he's about to balance someone's books. Brains don't retire, Rowan, he says, nodding at the empty coffee cup by my elbow. You taught me that when you took apart that pension board scandal. Remember? While everyone else was yelling, you were tracing numbers in silence. That's how you won. Clara glances toward the mantel where stacks of family photos frame a faded winter portrait of Ivy, her niece. Speaking of numbers, she says, her voice low. Ivy overheard something yesterday. Mara was at Greenbrier talking to the director about available rooms. Sounded like she wasn't asking for herself. The clink of Ephraim's spoon against his mug is louder than the jazz for a moment. I keep my face steady, but the pie feels heavier in my mouth. Ephraim moves closer, lowering himself into the chair across from me. His hands still steady despite the years fold over the table. Paperwork and timing win wars, not shouting. He says his tone even like he's explaining a ledger entry. You want to keep your house your freedom, don't give them reason to smell desperation. Dig quiet. Find their trail before they think you're even looking. The jazz fades into a low saxophone note filling the pause. Clara disappears into the living room and returns with a folded stack of papers, edges yellowed and curling. She places it beside my plate, a faded photocopy of my old 401k audit report. The one that cracked the pension mess wide open all those years ago. The paper smells faintly of dust and toner, its creases worn, from being handled too many times. Just in case you forgot what you're capable of. She says, her voice gentle now. I brush a crumb from the top page, tracing the faint signature line where I'd once signed off a lifetime ago. Outside, winter wind rattles the window, but the kitchen stays warm, jazz still crackling. My chest tightens, not with fear, but with a flicker of something steadier. Resolve, maybe. I slide the audit report into my coat pocket, its weight oddly reassuring. The pie's sweetness lingers on my tongue as I stand to leave, Ephraim's voice following me toward the door. Find the facts, Rowan, he says, softer now. Let them hang themselves with their own rope. As I step out into the night air, colder now than I expected, I can still hear the jazz playing faintly behind me. The audit report edges into my ribs, with each breath a reminder of the wars I've already fought and won. The email's subject line blinks in Ephraim's dim office light, Greenbrier, deposit confirmation. My hand shakes so hard I almost drop my coffee, the ceramic rim catching my front tooth with a faint clink. By the time I've clicked the message open, my favorite mug has chipped a jagged crescent missing from its lip. Steam curls out in uneven threads, the smell of burnt roast mixing with the cedar tang of Ephraim's shelves. Rain ticks against the window like a metronome, steady and unhurried. Keaton's voice hums through the phone speaker, calm as ever. Rowan, I triple-checked before calling. It's real. Mara put down a deposit 2 weeks ago. She didn't even bother to mask it under an LLC, the file's in her name. Greenbrier's director signed off on a tentative intake date. There's a pause, soft static filling the gap. She's moving fast. I scroll to the attachment, my stomach nodding as the scanned confirmation fills the screen. Her signature, pristine bold ink, slanted beneath the director's stamp. I can feel the faint tackiness of the screen as my thumb hovers over the page, as if touching the digital paper would let me make sense of it. I press my free hand over my thigh to still the tremor creeping into my fingers. Ephraim sits across the desk, his eyes flicking between the monitor and me, patient but unyielding. He flips through a manila folder, each page whispering like dry leaves. Soren's no better, he says finally, his voice low, even. He's buried under medical debt, some reconstructive surgery Mara had plus. He taps a line on the ledger he scrawled. Poker loans. 2 different markers, both overdue. The office feels smaller, the cedar scent sharper. I tighten my grip on the mug just as my hand jolts, and the crack deepens, a line running from rim to base. Hot coffee spills over my fingers, a burning stripe along my palm. I hiss through my teeth and set it down, the sound of ceramic against wood louder than it should be. They're not just circling, I murmur. They're already inside the walls. Keaton clears his throat on the line. And there's more. I just texted you a memo. Mara's been inquiring about a rush guardianship petition. Claims your mobility and speech are declining. She's laying groundwork. My phone buzzes almost on cue, and the thumbnail preview shows the header Petition Guidelines, Emergency Cases. Ephraim doesn't flinch. He reaches across the desk and slides a yellow legal pad toward me, its pages crisp, untouched. His handwriting in block letters tops the first line, Your checklist. He meets my eyes steady. Time to make your own list, Rowan. You can't stop a storm by shouting at the clouds. You outplan it. The rain outside intensifies, drumming harder against the glass, but inside the office it's still except for the soft hum of the phone line and the faint creak of Ephraim's chair. My palm throbs where the coffee burned the cracked mug cooling beside my elbow like a discarded warning. Keaton's voice cuts back and measured. I'll keep digging quietly, bank records, meeting logs, but you need to stay ahead. They're betting on you folding. I stare at the memo on my phone, the words blurring for a moment as the buzz in my ears rises. Somewhere under the static of the call, the rhythm of the rain steadies again, slower now, almost deliberate. I press my thumb against the chipped edge of the mug, feeling the rough seam where it split, and take a long breath. The phone buzzes again, another message from Keaton. This one, a blurred photo of Mara's memo, a highlighted line. Urgent evaluation request, 60-day target. My jaw tightens, but my voice stays even. Send me everything, every date, every contact. Ephraim leans back the leather of his chair, groaning softly. Paperwork and timing, he repeats, echoing the night at Clara's table. That's how you survived the pension collapse. That's how you survived this. I pick up the pen, tapping it twice against the blank page before writing the first line, confirm Greenbrier intake date. The ink bleeds slightly into the paper fibers, dark and certain. Outside, the rain slows to a whisper, like the sky itself is holding its breath. When Keaton disconnects, I glance at the cracked mug, steam long gone, a faint brown ring seeping into Ephraim's coaster. The legal pad waits beneath my hand, the first item already in place. My phone buzzes again, lighting the room with a cold glow, and the subject line of Keaton's last message stares back. Guardianship, draft filed. The wind outside gusts hard enough to rattle the shutters, the maple leaves thrashing against each other in a low hiss. Mara sits across from me at my dining table, spine straight, a practiced smile holding on her face. She spreads a neat stack of documents across the table like a card dealer, laying out her winning hand. The ink still smells fresh, sharp, and slightly sweet, as though the signatures might smudge if I breathe too close. This is just routine, Rowan, she says, smoothing the top page with her manicured fingers. A care assurance packet. Greenbrier requires it for intake. It makes things simpler. Her nails tap a faint rhythm on the edge of the paper, the sound quickening when I don't immediately reach for the pen. Soren stands by the window, his hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets. He won't look at me directly. His gaze fixed somewhere beyond the glass, where the clouds hang low over the Blue Ridge Hills. The smell of brewed tea drifts up from the kitchen, mild and faintly herbal, a soft counterpoint to the cold air leaking in from the rattling shutters. I let my hand tremble as I reach for the pen, an old reflex from the hospital weeks ago. Returning on cue. My movements look tentative, hesitant, but the strokes I lay down on the paper are steady, deliberate. Decades of poring over contracts, audits, and forged signatures have trained me well. My lines don't waver even when I let my shoulders sag for show. Mara's eyes flick to the antique clock on the mantel, then to the few heirlooms scattered around the room. My father's fountain pen, a chipped ceramic bowl Mila used to keep on the kitchen counter, a pair of framed photographs in tarnished silver frames. She mutters under her breath, maybe forgetting I can still hear perfectly well. Most of this can go. Yard sale. Maybe an appraiser for the clocks. The pen glides across the final page, the faint rasp of nib against paper louder than usual in the hush. I set it down gently, folding my hands over one another to mask the tension in my fingers. Mara begins gathering the documents before the ink can fully dry, her movements crisp, efficient. We'll take these to Greenbrier in the morning, she says, her smile never faltering. Everything will be handled, Rowan. You don't need to worry about a thing. Her voice drips with assurance, but there's a practiced distance to it, like she's already thinking about paint colors for these walls. I keep my expression neutral, even grateful, letting my eyes drop as though I'm too tired to meet hers. When she excuses herself to the hallway closet, ostensibly looking for a folder, I hear the faint scrape of a drawer sliding open. Moments later, she steps back into the dining room, holding up my old employee ID card between two fingers. The laminate has dulled over time, the edges worn smooth from years in my wallet. "This old thing might as well toss it," she says lightly, spinning it once between her fingers. I reach for it without a word, my hand calm even as the blood hums in my ears. The card's cool edge presses into my palm as I slip it back into my pocket, its familiar weight an anchor against the rising tide of her certainty. Sentimental. I murmur my voice just loud enough for her to hear. She shrugs, returning to her papers. The rest of the evening drifts by in a haze of polite conversation and the faint rustle of wind through the shutters. Soren finally speaks, his voice soft, as he sets my teacup down beside me. "You'll be more comfortable there, Dad. Staff around the clock, no stairs to climb. It's better this way." I nod faintly, eyes down, tracing the faint ring of condensation the cup leaves on the table. "Maybe so." I reply, letting a note of frailty edge into my tone. The less resistance I show now, the less they'll watch later. The house grows quiet as the evening deepens, the wind settling into a softer, rhythmic sway through the trees. I retreat to my bedroom, letting the floor creak deliberately under my uneven steps. The role of the worn-down father fitting easily, almost too easily. The ID card stays clutched in my pocket, the faintest ridge of its corner pressing into my skin as I lower myself into the chair by the window. Through the thin plaster walls, I catch the low murmur of voices, Mara's clipped, confident cadence, and Soren's hesitant baritone. Once he's settled, Soren whispers words barely audible over the sigh of the wind. "We move everything fast. House accounts, car." I stare out at the darkened yard, the branches swaying in silhouette, and close my fingers tighter around the ID card. The plastic's chill bites into my palm, a small sharp reminder that this isn't over, not by a long shot. The blinds in Ephraim's office slice the late summer sunlight into even bands striping the worn wood desk, where a neat stack of papers rests. The air smells faintly of lemon polish, and the distant whir of the ceiling fan keeps the heat from pressing too hard against my skin. I feel Ephraim's steady hand on my shoulder as I lean forward and sign the last document, each stroke deliberate. The pen scratches softly, filling the room with the sound of finality more than ink. Across from me, Garrett waits quietly, his weathered hands folded neatly over his lap. His eyes sweep the office not with greed, but with a quiet patience that reminds me why I chose him. He's not a speculator or a vulture, just a father looking to give his kids a yard and a roof that won't collapse under the weight of another lean year. "She'll be loved," he says softly, nodding to the paperwork that now makes him the owner of my house. His voice carries no triumph, only a simple, grounded relief. Ephraim gives the faintest approving grunt, his fingers drumming against his old brass letter opener as Garrett tucks his copy of the contract into a worn briefcase. The sound of leather creaking and paper sliding inside feels both grounding and strangely hollow, like I'm hearing the echo of the life I'm leaving behind. The bank manager, brisk and buttoned in a charcoal suit, slides a polished leather case across the desk toward me. Its weight settles against my foot, heavier than it looks, the soft scent of new leather mingling with the lingering tang of fresh ink. Inside, my accounts reduced to neat stacks of bills, sorted into envelopes the way I requested. A lifetime of savings. The arithmetic of decades compressed into a box small enough to carry. I lean back, fingers brushing the edge of the case, feeling the faint indentation where the handle curves. There's something sobering about its heft. It represents freedom, yes, but also the sharp cut of detachment. Each bill, each envelope is another tie severed from the home. I built board by board, another step into a future that has no fixed address yet. "Still time to back out," Ephraim mutters, though his tone says he knows I won't. His gaze is steady, a rare flicker of pride hiding beneath the habitual gruffness. "Most men your age cling to the beams until they splinter under them. You're smart enough to know when to move." "I'm not clinging," I reply quietly, my voice low enough to barely rise over the fan's hum. I'm just redirecting. I reach into my jacket pocket and draw out the small jeweler's envelope, its flap crisp against my fingertips. Inside rests my old employee ID, no longer dull and worn. On its back, freshly etched in neat, deliberate script, is the phrase, "Time reveals true worth." I run my thumb across the cool surface, feeling the faint ridge of the engraving. The card feels less like a relic now and more like a statement, a private emblem of defiance and closure. Garrett stands offering his hand. His grip is firm, but respectful, the gesture lingering just long enough to communicate something beyond business. "I'll take care of the place," he says, meeting my eyes. There's no pity in his expression, only understanding. And for the first time all week, I feel something close to relief in the transaction. My house isn't a bargaining chip for Mara anymore. It's a home for someone who actually needs it. As Garrett leaves the office, quiets again, save for the muffled murmur of voices out in the hall. Ephraim lowers himself into the chair opposite mine, sliding a fresh sheet of paper and a fountain pen across the desk. "Your will," he says simply. "Best we finalize it now while everything's clean." The scent of ink fills the space again, as I begin to write the strokes deliberate, almost ceremonial. Most of what I've just withdrawn, what I've salvaged, will go not to blood, but to a scholarship fund for finance students who've stumbled, who need a second chance to find their footing. Some might call it ironic, a retired auditor funding the next generation of hopefuls, but I call it balance. Not everything worth leaving behind can be touched or spent. When the final signature dries, Ephraim gathers the documents with a quiet efficiency, his eyes flicking briefly toward the sunlight, now spilling wider across the blinds. "It's done," he says, sliding everything into a folder. "No one can undo this without you." I nod, letting the tension in my shoulders ease just slightly. The leather case by my feet is still heavy, but it no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a plan, a line drawn, that Mara and Soren can't cross, no matter how many polite smiles or whispered schemes they bring to my doorstep. My phone buzzes against the armrest of the chair, breaking the stillness. The screen glows with Keaton's name, a new text lighting up in stark contrast against the muted tones of the office Mara confirmed arrival. "Be ready for morning." I close the envelope with the ID card, sliding it into my inner jacket pocket, where it rests against my chest, the cool plastic pressing lightly over my heartbeat. Outside, the sunlight dims as a cloud passes, casting the room in a softer, more deliberate shade. I exhale slowly, steadying myself for what comes next. Tomorrow doors will close, but others will open. And for once, I'm the one choosing which way they swing. Mara's voice carries too brightly, bouncing off the sterile walls of Greenbrier, like a game show host reading a cue card. "You'll love it here, Rowan." She trills her manicured fingers, grazing the edge of my sleeve, as if I might bolt without warning. The air smells faintly of disinfectant, sharp enough to cut through the weak scent of overbrewed coffee wafting from a distant kitchenette. A muted television hums in the corner, its newscaster's cadence tinny and hollow, a soundtrack for someone else's life. I tighten my grip on the cane Ephraim insisted I bring, letting it hang at just the right angle to sell the performance. Frailty as theater. Soren hovers a few steps behind Mara, his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes ringed with the sleepless purple haze of someone juggling debts and guilt. He doesn't speak, just shifts his weight from foot to foot, his gaze sliding toward the check-in counter, where a stack of brochures promises peaceful living in cheerful, looping fonts. I resist the urge to tell him the fonts lie, not because I care to wound him, but because the words would crack the thin mask I'm wearing, one I need to hold for just a few hours longer. The rain outside taps faintly against the long, narrow windows, each drop streaking down like a metronome, ticking off the last measures of this farce. I feel the folded weight of something in my coat pocket slip there moments ago, when Ivy Wind brushed past me with the grace of someone practiced in quiet defiance. Her eyes cool and deliberate, flicked toward the side exit without so much as a twitch in her smile. I know what she passed me before I even looked. Greenbrier's deposit receipt, crisp and damning, along with the tiny glint of a safe deposit box key. Both feel heavier than they should, anchors for a plan no one in this building is supposed to see coming. Keaton's presence is subtler than the others, his voice a low current threading beneath the false cheer around us. He leans against the reception counter, calm, his weathered hands loosely clasped over a slim folder. No flash, no flourish, just quiet steadiness. He doesn't meet my eyes, doesn't need to. Every tick of his body language says, stay small, stay quiet, let the stage collapse around them. Not you. Mara prattles on her words, a syrupy blend of comfort ease and how nice it'll be to have company. Her heels click across the tile in neat, orchestrated beats, the sound oddly hollow in the otherwise muted space. I nod when expected, keeping my voice soft. My shoulders rounded my pace, deliberately uneven. It feels absurd, this pantomime of frailty, but I've spent decades in conference rooms learning how to play the version of myself people wanted to see. It's not so different now, except this time, the stakes are my life, not a quarterly report. The handoff happens without spectacle. Keaton murmurs something to Ivy, and she disappears through a staff-only door. A minute later, she reemerges near the hallway, leading to the therapy rooms, her posture unchanged, her smile intact. She lingers just long enough to brush against me again this time, pressing a thin envelope against my side. No words, just the faintest pressure and the smell of starch from her pressed blouse as she moves on. I know without looking it's the waiver copy we discussed, one more shield in the armor I've been quietly assembling. When Mara finally ushers Soren toward the exit, her voice lilting as she reminds him to make sure the utilities are handled, I keep my expression neutral, almost docile. My hand rests lightly on the cane, the cool wood grounding me as I watch their silhouettes fade through the automatic doors. They don't glance back, not once. To them, the handoff is done. I'm an object they've successfully relocated, like a piece of outdated furniture delivered to storage. Keaton's hand brushes my elbow, a barely there nudge. Time, he whispers, just loud enough for me to catch over the hum of the air conditioning. We pivot toward the staff corridor, our steps measured but unhurried, and slip through the service exit Ivy's eyes pointed me toward earlier. The smell shifts immediately from antiseptic and stale carpet to the clean, damp breath of a summer storm. The drizzle kisses my face as we step into the parking lot, cool and sharp, washing away the cloying residue of Mara's performance. Keaton's aging Ford waits at the far end, its paint dulled, and the muffler humming with the low growl of a vehicle that's seen too many miles. The engine ticks softly as we slide inside the seats, worn but familiar, like old work boots that never quite let you down. Ivy's envelope sits on my lap, the crinkle of its contents muted beneath the steady rhythm of the rain drumming on the windshield. I tuck it deep into the inner pocket of my coat, feeling the hard edges settle against my chest. As Keaton eases the car onto the slick road, the wipers squeaking in tired arcs, I glance into the side mirror just long enough to catch sight of a dark SUV pulling into Greenbrier's front drive. Soren's unmistakably. His headlights cut through the gray, his vehicle pausing at the awning as if sniffing for the scent of triumph. He doesn't know the rooms inside are empty of me. By the time he realizes the ghost he's chasing isn't there, we'll be well beyond the city limits. Keaton merges onto the highway, the hum of his worn engine blending with the patter of rain. He doesn't look at me, just keeps his eyes on the road, his voice low enough to feel like part of the car's vibrations when he finally speaks. By the time they read your letter, he murmurs, "You'll be halfway to Charleston." The road stretches ahead, gray and slick under the thick clouds, each mile marker a quiet tally of the distance between who I was yesterday and who I intend to be tomorrow. I lean back against the seat, the drizzle streaking across the glass beside me like faint brushstrokes. For the first time in months, maybe years, I feel the faintest pull of something that isn't dread or resentment. Not quite relief, not yet, but something closer to freedom. The cafe windows fog slightly where the morning sun hits the glass, turning the view of the Cooper River into something soft and shifting. The tide rises and falls in a slow, measured rhythm like the city itself is breathing. Ephraim slides a steaming mug toward me. Across the small wooden table, the scent of roasted beans, rich and grounding, warm Charleston air. My toast sits untouched beside it, crumbs, trailing across the plate like half-finished thoughts. Next to the plate rests a small jeweler's envelope, cream-colored and unassuming, its flap sealed tight. Inside waits the piece of my past I finally decided to send away. The cafe hums with quiet life students in corner booths, hunched over laptops, the low hiss of the espresso machine, faint jazz curling from a speaker near the counter. None of it feels intrusive. If anything, the normalcy softens the edges of what we're here to do. I run my thumb along the edge of the envelope, feeling the faint ridge of the etched words on the ID card inside. Time reveals true worth. The phrase feels heavier now than it did when I had it etched, as though each letter carries the weight of a different chapter I'd rather not relive. Ephraim leans back his chair, creaking faintly, and glances toward the river. He'll open it, curse, maybe laugh. He says, voice steady as ever, but he'll remember it, Rowan. That's the point. His hand, rough and warm, rests against his coffee cup, as if it's anchoring him in this place, this moment. I imagine Soren's face when the package arrives, the bundle of colorful Monopoly bills folded neatly. The hollow plastic piggy bank rattling empty, the single photo of Millie and me from the early years, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes bright with a kind of light that never dimmed until the very end. And then the ID card, its cool surface engraved, not with anger, but with a quiet truth. No screaming, no lawyers, no spectacle. Just a reminder that some inheritances weigh more than gold or deeds, and that lessons once delivered can't be returned or ignored. My gaze drifts to the river again, to the way the sunlight skips across its surface in broken flashes. My reflection hovers there, fractured by ripples, familiar, but not quite whole. There's a lightness in me, a sense of release, but also a peculiar heaviness, as if every choice I've made over these last years is pressing down just enough to remind me it all mattered. Even the pain had purpose. Ephraim nudges the toast plate closer to me with a small, almost paternal gesture. She'd be proud, you know, he murmurs. Not of the fight maybe, but of how you finished it. Lessons don't always bloom right away. Give it time. I pick up the coffee instead, cradling it between my palms as the steam curls upward in soft shifting threads. The bitterness bites gently at my tongue when I take a sip, grounding me. Millie's laugh echoes in the back of my mind, the sound of her leaning against the Asheville kitchen counter, teasing me about my stubborn streak, flour smudged on her cheek. We always dreamed Soren would outgrow the weight of our flaws, that he'd learn patience where I had temper, kindness where she had steel. Maybe this will be the push he needs, or maybe it won't. Some things can't be forced. The jazz fades into a softer tune as a courier steps through the cafe door, the small bell above it chiming with a polite clarity. He scans the room, spots me, and approaches with the calm precision of someone accustomed to routine. His uniform smells faintly of starch and ink as he accepts the envelope, tucking it carefully into a slim case before snapping the latch shut. Delivery confirmed, sir, he says, offering a brief nod. As the courier leaves the tide outside, gives another slow exhale, the river's surface rippling gently as a light breeze sweeps through. I set the empty coffee cup down its porcelain, making the faintest click against the saucer. My pulse, which had been a steady drum since dawn, begins to ease each beat, a little less urgent than the last. Ephraim raises his cup in a quiet, almost ceremonial gesture, and I mirror him without words. Outside, the sunlight deepens over Charleston, painting the river in a sheen of gold. Whatever comes next for Soren, for me, it's no longer tethered to the weight of the past I've just sent away. The river moves on unbothered, and so will I. The sea breeze tugs at my collar the moment I step out onto the porch, carrying with it the faint tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls riding the winter air. The Atlantic stretches wide and silver before me, the sun hanging low, its light catching on the water in slow, deliberate glints. It feels nothing like Asheville's mountains, nothing like the quiet streets where I spent so many years, but the rhythm of the waves has become familiar, a sound I've learned to breathe with. Inside my cottage smells faintly of cedar and brewed tea. Ephraim's thermos resting on the kitchen counter beside a stack of paper plates, and the remains of a simple lunch, turkey sandwiches, an open bag of kettle chips, a few stray crumbs scattered like a trail. 2 students, both recipients of the scholarship I helped endow, had just left, their voices still echoing faintly in my ears. One wants to study forensic accounting. The other dreams of running a nonprofit to help retirees untangle their finances. Their ambition feels raw, unpolished, and genuine, and for the first time in years, I felt that same old flicker inside me, the one that used to light up whenever I unraveled a ledger or exposed a buried scheme. On my desk, next to a framed photo of Millie from a sunlit summer long ago, rests another frame, my old employee ID card now mounted behind glass. The jeweler's engraving on the back isn't visible, but in the photograph from the scholarship office beside it, I can see the faint gleam where the words catch the light. Time reveals true worth. It's no longer a weapon, no longer a reminder of what was taken. Now it's a marker, a silent guardian, over something that might outlast me in the only way that matters. Ephraim steps out onto the porch beside me, his coat zipped up to his chin, thermos in hand. He pours 2 cups of tea, steam rising in thin twisting streams before the wind carries it off. We stand there together without speaking, watching the tide roll in and retreat, the waves tracing and erasing lines of foam along the sand. There's comfort in the quiet, the kind born of 2 men who've said enough over the years and don't need to fill every gap with words. A single envelope sits on the kitchen table behind us, the only thing in the house I haven't touched today. Its edges are sharp, unbent, Soren's handwriting unmistakable on the front. I had seen it when the students were packing up their laughter, fading down the path toward the road, and I'd thought about opening it then. I even reached for it once, my thumb catching on the edge of the paper. But now, as I sip the tea and feel its warmth seep into my fingers, I let the idea drift out with the tide. Some currents can't be forced, and some tides don't come in until they're ready. I glance back through the doorway, my eyes catching on Millie's photo, then the ID card, both lit by the last rays of the day, filtering through the window. I rest my hand on the porch railing, the wood cool beneath my palm, and whisper more to the wind than to anyone. Some tides can wait. The words vanish in the breeze, stolen by the sea, and I'm oddly relieved. There's no need for answers yet. Not from Soren, not from me. I take another sip of tea as the horizon glows deeper. The sun dipping low, staining the sky with streaks of amber and violet. The waves continue their tireless work below, pulling back, pushing forward, smoothing over every footprint left in the sand by the students, by Ephraim, by me. The beach resets itself without asking permission, without fanfare, as if it knows the value of a clean slate better than any of us ever could. Ephraim offers me a slight nod, a wordless agreement that whatever comes next can wait for another day. I step down from the porch and onto the cool sand, the dampness seeping gently through my shoes. My footprints trail behind me for a few yards before the next wave reaches up, erasing them in a single quiet sweep. I stop and watch as the tide does its work, patient and unwavering. The air smells of salt and distant pine from the shoreline trees, the cold brushing against my cheeks, with a gentleness that surprises me. The Atlantic stretches out like a blank page, silver under the fading light, and for the first time in longer than I can name, I feel no need to write anything on it, not yet. The water, the sky, and the rhythm between them feel enough. Behind me, the cottage windows catch the last glimmer of daylight, throwing back a reflection of the porch, where the envelope still waits unopened. Ahead, the waves whisper over the sand, carrying with them the promise of second winds and new tides whenever they choose to arrive. I breathe in the cold, clean air and let it out slowly, my eyes fixed on the line, where the sea meets the darkening sky. The waves erase the last trace of my path, leaving only a smooth stretch of beach beneath the winter twilight. A clean slate under a sky that feels just wide enough to hold it all. The last light of winter dusk glows across the cottage windows, and for a moment I catch my reflection beside that framed ID card at the scholarship office, no longer a relic, but a marker of what was mended. Standing on that quiet porch, tea still warm in my hands, I realize justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through second chances and calm horizons. Bridges don't all survive, but the ones rebuilt can carry more than we ever expected. If you've ever felt cast aside or betrayed, know there's always a way to start again, even if it begins with one careful step. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? Share it with us or tell me what tides you're waiting for.